Everything you have been told about the disappearance of Amelia Earhart is likely wrong. We all know the story. A heroic pilot, an impossible flight, and a tragic end. She ran out of fuel over the vast Pacific, crashed into the water, and sank without a trace. It is the official explanation. It is simple, logical, and it is the one theory that the evidence doesn't support. For more than 80 years, the world has been looking in the wrong place. We've been listening to the wrong story. What if her last, desperate radio calls weren't her final moments? What if they were the beginning of a different, more terrifying story? The story of a castaway. Today, we are not just retelling the mystery. We are deconstructing it. Because the truth of what happened to Amelia Earhart is hidden not in the deep ocean, but on a desolate, forgotten island, 400 miles from where the world thought she was lost. Chapter 1. The Icon and the Impossible Quest. To understand how it ended, we must first understand the woman at the center of it. Amelia Earhart was not just a pilot. She was a phenomenon. In the 1930s, she was a cultural force, a symbol of modern, liberated womanhood. In an age when women were expected to be homemakers, Earhart was a social worker, a writer, a poet, a fashion designer, and a record-breaking aviator. She wasn't just participating in the golden age of flight, she was defining it. After her 1932 solo Atlantic flight, a feat only Charles Lindbergh had accomplished before her, she became arguably the most famous woman on Earth. She was the face of progress, of courage, of the boundless potential of the 20th century. But inside, she felt like a fraud. Her fame, she confided, had outpaced her actual technical skill. She needed one more flight, one final, monumental achievement to cement her legacy, not just as a female pilot, but as the greatest pilot, period. The goal: to be the first woman to circumnavigate the globe at its widest point, the equator. Her aircraft was not some flimsy biplane. It was a machine on the cutting edge of technology, a Lockheed Electra 10E. A twin-engine, all-metal monoplane, financed by Purdue University and called her Flying Laboratory. It was the most advanced civilian aircraft of its day. But this mission was haunted from the start. Her first attempt in March of 1937, flying west to east, ended in a spectacular public failure. On takeoff from Luke Field in Hawaii, she lost control. The heavily loaded Electra ground looped, a violent, uncontrolled spin on the runway that collapsed the landing gear and severely damaged the aircraft. To a lesser person, this humiliating, expensive crash would have been the end. To Amelia, it was a costly obstacle. She had the plane meticulously rebuilt, a process that took 2 months and a fortune. She was undeterred. But this failure added an immense psychological pressure to her second attempt. She could not fail again. Just 2 months later, she was ready. This time, flying east to west to account for changing weather patterns. With her was a new navigator, a man considered one of the best in the world, Fred Noonan. Noonan was a legend in Pan Am's Clipper fleet, a master of long-distance, over-ocean navigation using celestial charts and dead reckoning. But Noonan also had a rumored weakness, a reputation for heavy drinking. Amelia was under intense pressure to succeed, to justify the cost, and to prove her own skills after the Hawaii crash. Do you believe this psychological pressure to get it done was a key factor in the tragedy? Let me know your thoughts on her legacy in the comments below. Chapter 2. The Impossible Leg. By late June 1937, the pair had been astonishingly successful. They had flown from California to Miami, across the Atlantic to Africa, over the jungles of India, and across Southeast Asia. They had completed 22,000 miles of the 29,000-mile journey. They were exhausted mentally and physically, but they were on the home stretch. Only 7,000 miles of open Pacific Ocean remained. On July 2nd, they arrived in La, New Guinea. The atmosphere was thick, not just with tropical humidity, but with tension. Ahead of them lay the single most dangerous leg of the entire journey, a 2,556-mile, 18-hour flight over a featureless ocean. Their target? A tiny, flat, barren speck of land called Howland Island. Howland Island is perhaps the most isolated place on Earth. It is 2 miles long, half a mile wide. A fleck of coral in the largest ocean in the world. Finding it with 1930s technology was not just difficult, it was a near impossibility. To guide her in, the U.S. Coast Guard had stationed a cutter, the Itasca, just off the island. The Itasca would serve as a radio beacon. The plan was simple. The Itasca would transmit a constant signal, and Amelia would use her state-of-the-art radio direction finder to home in on it. But here, the first critical and fatal problem emerged. Amelia's radio direction finder, the very piece of equipment she needed to find Howland, was not fully functional. It's believed she had difficulty operating it. Even worse, the long wire receiving antenna underneath the fuselage had been damaged on the rough airfields and, rather than fix it, she may have had it removed in La to save weight. Furthermore, there was a deep, catastrophic confusion about radio frequencies. Earhart and the Itasca were operating on different, incompatible frequencies and schedules. The Itasca could transmit on 7,500 kilohertz, but Earhart's RDF loop was only designed to listen on 500 kilohertz. She could hear them on her standard radio, but she couldn't get a fix. They had, in effect, planned to talk to each other, but had never properly agreed on what language to speak. Before takeoff from La, Earhart and Noonan were visibly tired. The plane was overloaded with fuel, sluggish and heavy. At 10 a.m. local time, the Silver Electra lumbered down the wet, muddy runway and, with precious few feet to spare, lifted into the sky. They were flying toward a sandspec target with unreliable communication and a damaged antenna. It was an enormous, almost reckless risk. If you find this kind of deep dive into the technical details fascinating, consider subscribing to the Somnolent Shelf. We dig into the truth behind the greatest mysteries. Chapter 3. We are running north and south. For the next 18 hours, they flew into darkness, then into a new dawn. Aboard the Itasca, the radio room was on high alert. Chief radioman Leo Bellarts and his team were huddled over their equipment, straining to hear a signal through the ocean static. Commander Warner Thompson was anxious. The weather was cloudy, not ideal for celestial navigation, meaning Noonan would be flying blind, relying entirely on Earhart's radio. In the early morning of July 2nd, the Itasca's radio operators heard it. Faint voice, clear, calm, and unmistakable. It was Amelia. Her first signals were strong. At 6:15 a.m., she reported, "We must be on you, but cannot see you. But gas is running low. Been unable to reach you by radio." The Itasca radio room was frantic. They were hearing her, but she apparently could not hear them. They cranked up their transmitters, blasting her call sign into the sky. She never acknowledged it. Her radio receiver was, for all practical purposes, deaf. They could hear her pleas, but she could not hear their answer. Then, at 7:42 a.m., her most famous and most chilling transmission. Her voice, still calm but with a noticeable edge of tension. "We are on the line 157-337. We will repeat this message. We will repeat this on 6,210 kilocycles." Wait. This was not a random string of numbers. It was a navigation line. It meant Noonan had taken a sun line, a celestial fix that told them they were somewhere along a specific line of position. They knew this line passed through Howland Island. They just didn't know where on the line they were, north of it or south of it. The Itasca transmitted, "Acknowledge." They sent a steady stream of A's for her to home in on. No response. The Itasca operators, desperate, even tried transmitting in Morse code on 7,500 kilohertz, hoping she could hear that. Nothing. The silence in the radio room, punctuated by static, was agonizing. At 8:43 a.m., almost an hour later, her final, confirmed transmission was heard. The professionalism was gone. Her voice was now high, strained, and panicked. "We are on you, but cannot see you. Gas is running low. We are flying at 1,000 feet. We are running north and south." And then, silence. The Itasca kept transmitting, pleading into the static for another 2 hours. But there was no reply. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan, along with their 12-ton flying laboratory, had vanished. That last call, "We are running north and south," is the single most important clue in the entire mystery. What does that message say to you? Does it sound like a pilot who is completely lost, or one who is actively searching for a specific landmark? Let me know your analysis. Chapter 4. The official theory, crash and sink. The lost phase was over. The search phase had begun. President Roosevelt immediately authorized a massive search, the largest and most expensive in naval history at the time. The battleship Colorado, the aircraft carrier Lexington, and dozens of other ships and planes scoured 250,000 square miles of ocean, an area larger than the state of Texas. They found nothing. No oil slick, no wreckage, no floating debris, no seat cushions, no bodies. It was as if the Electra had been erased from the sky. After 16 days, the official search was called off. The U.S. Navy's official report was grim and simple. Earhart and Noonan had missed Howland Island, run out of fuel, been forced to ditch the plane in the open ocean, and sank, presumably in deep, uncharted waters. This became the crash and sink theory. It was the simplest explanation, and for 80 years it has been the official story. It was logical. They were in a plane over an ocean and they disappeared. Occam's razor suggests they crashed. But this theory has a massive, gaping flaw. The Electra was not a rock. It was a 12-ton machine with large, empty fuel tanks in its wings, which would have acted as flotation devices. A water ditching, even a violent one, would have left a massive debris field. Seat cushions, log books, and pieces of the aluminum fuselage would have floated for days, if not weeks. The fact that the largest search in history, in the correct location at the correct time, found absolutely nothing suggests that crashing and sinking right there. maybe the one thing that didn't happen. The official story is neat. They crashed, they sank. But does it bother you that the largest naval search in history found nothing? Not one slick of oil, not one piece of debris. Share your thoughts on the crash and sink theory. Chapter 5. The Conspiracy. The Japanese Capture. The lack of evidence created a vacuum, and that vacuum was soon filled by rumor, speculation, and conspiracy. For days after she officially vanished, faint, fragmented, and desperate radio calls were being picked up by amateur radio operators all across the Pacific, from Hawaii to Australia. A 15-year-old girl in Florida, Betty Clenk, wrote in her diary that she heard a woman's voice, terrified, saying, "This is Amelia Earhart. Our plane is down. On an uncharted island. Our navigator, Fred Noonan, is injured." These post-loss signals were dismissed at the time as hoaxes. But they formed the basis of a second, far darker theory. What if she was a spy? What if she hadn't crashed, but had been captured? This is the Japanese capture theory. In the 1930s, the Pacific was a political tinderbox. Japan was aggressively militarizing, fortifying islands it had been given control of after World War I, known as the Japanese Mandate. The theory suggests that Earhart's world flight was a cover, sanctioned by President Roosevelt to fly over these restricted Japanese islands, like Saipan, and take photographs. In this scenario, she was forced down, captured by the Japanese, and, along with Noonan, executed as a spy. The US government, to avoid an international incident that could lead to war, simply played dumb, pretending she was lost at sea. This theory gained traction for decades. Eyewitnesses in Saipan claimed to have seen a tall, white woman and man in Japanese custody. In 2017, a photograph emerged from the US National Archives, showing a group of people on a dock in the Marshall Islands. Some proponents claimed it showed a captured, short-haired Earhart and a kneeling Fred Noonan. But this theory, like the photo, has been largely debunked. The photo was found to have been published in a Japanese travelogue 2 years before Earhart's disappearance. There is no hard evidence, no government documents, no credible link that she was a spy. It is a compelling cinematic story, but it is almost certainly just a story. This spy theory is dramatic, but it's built on debunked evidence. We're committed to separating fact from fiction. If you appreciate this no-nonsense, evidence-based storytelling, the best way to support the channel is by hitting that like button. Chapter 6. The Castaway Theory. The crash and sink theory is too simple and flawed. The Japanese capture theory is too complex and unsubstantiated. Which leaves us with a third option. An option that is perhaps the most logical, the most scientifically supported, and the most utterly tragic. This is the Nikumaroro theory. Let's go back to her last confirmed radio call. "We are on the line 157-337. We are running north and south." This is the key. She was on that line. Howland Island was on that line. But if she missed Howland, and she was running low on fuel, she couldn't just keep searching. Her only option was to turn south, along that same line of position, toward a chain of islands called the Phoenix Islands. And just 400 miles south-southeast of Howland, right on that 157 to 337 line, is a small, uninhabited coral atoll. In 1937, it was called Gardner Island. Today, it is known as Nikumaroro. The theory, championed by Tyre, is this: Earhart, unable to find Howland, turned south. As her fuel ran out, she and Noonan saw the reef of Gardner Island. It was a desperate last-chance landing. The island has a wide, flat reef that is exposed at low tide. Amelia Earhart, one of the best pilots in the world, successfully landed the Electra 10E on that reef. They were alive. They were on land. But they were castaways on an island with no food and no water. This is where the post-loss radio signals become critical. The Electra was damaged, but its radio, running on the plane's batteries, could still transmit. For the next several nights, as the tide went out, Earhart and Noonan would climb back into the wreck and desperately send out calls for help. This explains why the signals were faint, why they only came at night, and why they were fragmented. They did this for 5, perhaps 6 nights, until, finally, a high tide or a powerful wave washed the 12-ton Electra off the reef, and it sank into the deep, dark ocean abyss. The radio fell silent. Earhart and Noonan were now well and truly alone. This is a powerful and tragic theory. The idea that they didn't crash but landed changes everything. Does this castaway theory make more sense to you than the simple crash? I'd be very interested to read your analysis in the comments. Chapter 7: The Forensic Evidence. This is a powerful theory, but is there any evidence? In 1940, 3 years after the disappearance, a British colonial administrator named Gerard Gallagher landed on Gardner Island. He was there to survey it for a new settlement. In the island's remote southeast corner, he made a gruesome discovery. He found a partial human skeleton, 13 bones in all, lying under a scaevola bush. Nearby, he found a woman's shoe, a man's shoe, a box that had once held a sextant, a navigator's tool, and a bottle of Benedictine. He also noted that a fire had been lit, and the remains of turtles and fish were scattered about. He dutifully collected the bones and sent them to Fiji to be analyzed. Dr. D.W. Hoodless, a medical examiner, measured the bones and, in 1941, came to a simple conclusion. The bones were male, short, stocky, and European. They could not be Earhart. The bones were then tragically lost. And so the trail went cold. Until 1998, when Tyre researchers, led by Rick Gillespie, uncovered Dr. Hoodless' original, detailed file with his measurements. They fed these measurements into a modern forensic database. The results were stunning. Hoodless' 1941 assessment was wrong. The bones were, in his own words, more consistent with a female than a male. In 2018, a new landmark study by Dr. Richard Jantz at the University of Tennessee, using modern forensic anthropology, reanalyzed the measurements. His conclusion: the bones have a 99% probability of belonging to Amelia Earhart. The evidence doesn't stop there. Tyre has led over a dozen expeditions to the tiny atoll of Nikumaroro. They have turned it from a speck of coral into a massive, sprawling archaeological site. And what they have found paints a heartbreaking picture of a desperate fight for survival. They found the remains of hundreds of small campfires, exactly where the skeleton was found. They found bones from fish, sea turtles, and flightless birds, all cooked. They found a small glass jar broken, but with its bottom intact. Chemical analysis of the residue inside revealed it to be an American-made 1930s era brand of freckle-fading cream. A cosmetic that Amelia Earhart, who was self-conscious about her freckles, was known to use. They found a zipper from a 1930s-era flight jacket. They found a small glass cat's paw jar. They found a small, red, cracked pocket knife, consistent with the type Earhart carried. And then, perhaps most compelling of all, they found a piece of metal. A small, torn fragment of aircraft-grade aluminum. It did not belong to any known plane that had crashed in the area. But in 2014, researchers matched the unique, custom rivet pattern on this fragment to a photograph of Amelia's Electra. The photo, taken in Miami, showed a custom patched-over window on the plane's fuselage. The rivet pattern was a perfect match. That small piece of aluminum with its matching rivet pattern is the closest thing we have to a smoking gun. What piece of evidence do you find the most compelling? The bones, the freckle cream jar, or that metal fragment? Let me know. Chapter 8. The Legacy of a Mystery. This is the scientific, forensic, and heartbreaking case for the Nikumaroro theory. It tells us that Amelia Earhart's final chapter was not a quick, merciful plunge into the ocean. It was a slow, agonizing, and intelligent fight for life. She and an injured Fred Noonan survived for days, perhaps even months, as castaways. They lit fires, they tried to catch fish, they tried to collect water. And on a lonely, barren, sun-scorched reef, the most famous woman in the world died of thirst and exposure, looking at the same empty ocean that was once her greatest passion. So, where does this leave us? We have three competing narratives: a simple, tragic accident, a complex political conspiracy, and a desperate, scientific-backed fight for survival. The crash and sink theory, while official, fails to explain the lack of any wreckage and the persistent, credible post-loss radio signals. The Japanese capture theory, while cinematic, is built on debunked evidence and speculation. The Nikumaroro castaway theory, however, it explains everything. It fits the last radio calls. It fits the post-loss signals. And it is backed by a growing, compelling, and tangible mountain of forensic and archaeological evidence. We still haven't found the smoking gun, the Electra itself. It likely lies in the deep, 15,000-foot abyss just off the Nikumaroro Reef, a needle in a haystack far more complex than Howland Island ever was. But the mystery of what happened to Amelia Earhart is, perhaps, finally being solved. The real question is why we are still so haunted by it. She was not just a pilot. She was a symbol of that uniquely human desire to push past the horizon, to challenge the unknown. And in her final, tragic act, she flew past that horizon, and she became the unknown. A permanent, unsolved, and powerful mystery, forever lost in the static, on a lonely line of position, running north and south. What do you believe happened to Amelia Earhart? The simple crash, the political capture, or the desperate fight for survival as a castaway? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This mystery, more than any other, deserves to be talked about.